They'll be running roughshod over everyone up here, just like in Texas. You can bet on it. I sure wouldn't want to get in their way. This, Sladek, does he have sons? Used to have 5. 3 of them got killed by gang outlaws in Texas about 15 years ago. A feller named Jim Hodges and a dozen killers. Bronco's face went hot. How'd they know who done it? Well, one of the sons was still alive when Hupper and his men came along, and he lived long enough to say how they'd been hanging a rustler when this Hodges and his gang came shooting. The rustler got away. A fellow named, Wiley Haynes. Bucket in hand, the cook turned and headed across the open land toward the far creek and the cottonwoods. Curly and Bronco sat staring at each other and the distant wagon with its small, flickering campfire. It was a cold spring night with black clouds hovering, and they were in a lot of trouble. They could hear the cattle bellowing in the distance, but there were no other night sounds except the crackle of the fire. Bronco was sitting with his elbows on his crossed knees, sipping his coffee. His nose, broken twice, was slightly crooked in a weathered face with rough features and ice-blue eyes. Both feet had been stomped on, and his left leg had been cracked more than once. Curly hunched up as he drew his blankets around him, his green eyes glistening wet and voice low. "We been avoiding them Sladeks for 15 years. They find out I'm Haynes and your Hodges were deader than last year's cow chip." Bronco spoke in a whisper. "Is Charity your daughter?" Curly slowly rubbed his wet face with the back of his hand. "Seems like. That was her ma's name. That tells me Sladek sure enough knew who she was." Bronco drew his heavy coat more closely over his leather vest and soiled blue shirt. His breeches were stiff from mud and too many river crossings. Weary, he looked toward the other campfire and the Sladek wagon, but there was no sign of the women. Bronco grimaced, shaking his head. "Jim Hodges, outlaw. No Sladek's gonna admit a 15-year-old kid wasted 3 of their own. If they figure out who we are, they won't waste time making us dead. We get out of here before daylight tomorrow." I was a skinny kid, half my size. My nose had been busted twice. They'd never recognized me. And you growed that beard and lost most of your hair. I ain't taking no chances. Bronco drew his blankets around him and leaned back on his saddle. He pulled his Stetson down on his lined brow and stretched. "Before we leave, don't you figure your daughter ought to know she wasn't thrown away? And tie her down to a ugly, broken old cowhand who ain't got nothing except what he carries on his saddle. She was only 2 when I left her in the church sound asleep. She probably hates me for leaving her. Besides, who'd believe a fellow like me was her pa? Well, you know blamed well you want to see her." Curly's voice turned to a whisper. "I don't want her to see me." He turned his face away and pulled his hat over his eyes to hide his face. And Bronco lay with his eyes closed, thinking back all those years to his own father. The terrible image of Rad Hodges dangling from a cottonwood was always there, and the pain and suffering of a 14-year-old boy would never leave him. Curly had nearly died the same way a year later, and Bronco never wanted to see that again. They were disturbed as a rider approached, and they both sat up to watch a tall, husky man with near white eyes and a scar across his left cheek. Wearing a heavy coat, he had a flat nose and looked mighty unfriendly as he dismounted and walked over for a meal. He paused, glaring down at him. "Who the devil are you?" The cook came back with a bucket of water and paused. "Laszlo, these are friends of mine, so just eat." "Yeah, well, I don't like grub."